Good morning, friends. We are in this home stretch of our summer season of forming questions, this series where we look to a question in the Bible and let it stir us to form questions that can become questions that then form us. I'm Pastor Sara. I'm here via video as I continue to recover from post-concussion syndrome. And my body is still relearning how to process adrenaline and just all that stuff that goes with public speaking. So thank you for the grace to let God speak through a previously recorded moment. So thank you for that. As we settle into our sermon time, if I just take a good breath and wiggle into that spot that you're in, I invite us to also try something that I found valuable that someone else taught me this week. It's a process of remembering and making the space within ourselves to remember that psyche space that is ours, that is us. And to recognize that we hold space in who we are. This is something that I'm relearning, especially in my recovery. I'm reclaiming the space that I hold after having an experience of being thrown out of my space, out of myself. But I invite you just to close your eyes for a moment and to feel this space within you, your psyche, your space, your psyche space. And what often happens is that the emotional energy of others can move on in to our space. Do you know what I mean? And I wonder who is in your space? Whose psyche energy is in there with you, blurring the boundaries around who and where you are. This happens to all of us as folks get in here with us. We end up carrying around a whole lot of emotional energy that is not ours, and it can weigh us down. It can cause us pain, emotional pain, as well as actual physical pain. So who is in your space? I invite you to take a moment to invite that person or those people to leave your personal space. To just imagine them leaving, to open that door in a sense and just let them out. And it's not that you're abandoning them. It's not that you're ignoring them, but you're letting yourself hold your own healthy boundary around who you are and the space you are intended to hold in this world. And they can have their own space too. So we take a moment to breathe, to let ourselves show up, and just to own our space now. You can kind of keep doing that releasing work. But thank you, friends, just for taking that moment with me, that gift of remembering the fullness of who we are, but you to keep holding that space that is you. Now, I hope that you are even more present here in this time together and in the space that you hold. So I wanted us to start this way because today, together, we take time to listen. Listening is one of our core practices here at Salt House, the practice of paying attention, which we see as central to the life of Jesus. We call this core practice of ours hearing God. It is one of our 7 core practices. So much of what we do here at Salt House gets at this practice of hearing God, and one of the flagrant ways that we do this is to put our listening into practice and making that something that we do here on a Sunday morning together. And it's in our regular practice of Lectio Divina, a way of listening to Scripture and hearing God speak to us through it, meeting us as we are in the specifics of our lives in this moment and in this season that we're in. And so for us to be in this series on letting our questions form us, we need to listen. We need to listen for our questions. Let them bubble up in this space within ourselves that we've just remembered and reformed. And we do it today through Lectio Divina, practicing listening, asking what God is saying through the Bible. So that, my friends, is what we get to do together today. So for those who are new to it, Lectio Divina, it's Latin and it means holy word or divine reading. And it's a practice that's been around since the 3rd century that involves repeating a section of the Bible. So we hear it a few times and we're listening to it just for a word then that gets our attention, maybe a short phrase. And then prayerfully holding that word or phrase, looking for connections to our life now and what God is saying to us in that. Why is it getting our attention? I am so grateful every time that we get to do this every time we practice Lectio Divina, for this time right now that we have before us is such a gift of slowing down, listening. It's such a rare gift of time, one that I know I need every time that we do it. So our text that we're choosing for today is from Jesus' most famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, which stretches across chapters 5, 6, and 7 of Matthew's Gospel. Our text for today is near the beginning of this teaching, and we step into then just a small piece of this larger conversation where Jesus is laying out this really upside down, crazy way of existing in the world that is counterintuitive and countercultural in so many ways, especially in what he describes here in our text. So I chose this text because the forming question that is here is such a good question. And I think it's one that we need to hold in the midst of what we are hearing and experiencing in our country and in our wider world right now. I want to say a little bit more about the text before we hear it, which I don't usually do, because usually we let Lectio Divina, it's like an experience of just letting the text speak on its own. But just some of the things that are said here, it feels important just given what's in there. So I often pick a Lectio Divina text that feels very encouraging and inspiring and also has lots of layers to it. And this text for today, it is that. But it's also hard and challenging. And I just want to name that up front. I find myself squirming a little bit when I hear it because Jesus describes a posture for us for how to exist in the world, and it is not easy. Part of this text includes the phrase that we know, the turn the other cheek phrase, though it's in this particular translation, it's said differently than that. But Jesus describes how we are meant to let go and not keep score, and yes, to not fight back. And I want to be overtly clear, this is what I really wanted to say on the outset of this. Like what Jesus says here about not seeking retribution, about turning the other cheek, this does not hold true for abuse of any kind, right? It does not justify violence against us, against anyone. We don't turn the other cheek to that. That is something that we seek help for because that needs to stop. It is not okay. And Jesus here is actually calling for the end of that violence, to stop the cycle of violence that is our default setting of existence so often. So that's why we turn the other cheek, to stop the cycle of violence that begets more violence and more violence and more violence. That cycle happens in patterns of abuse, but also in the larger cycles of hate and violence that we see in our world right now. So again, this is a good, challenging text for us to hold in this moment, but it felt important just to name this nuance, this up front, that we aren't distracted by that, by how this text could be twisted into something justifying that we keep letting violence happen to ourselves or to others. That's not it. Jesus is inviting us to stop those cycles. So naming that out just on the outset, it frees us. I know it frees me from getting hung up on that. You know, I squirm in not a good way when I hear that, so that we can hear how it speaks to us. There are other ways that it makes us squirm and challenges us that are really compelling. And there's so much more that I love to say about forgiveness and what's happening in this text and all this stuff, but that's all for another time. Because again, Lectio Divina is about letting the text just prayerfully speak to us, listening for what's happening in us as we hear God, as we listen together. So friends, let's begin Lectio Divina. I invite you just to roll those shoulders back. The first step of Lectio Divina is just reading. We read the text. So be connected to that breath, attentive, open. And our first time reading is just to hear the text with no agenda. It's a longer one, so get ready for some good stuff. This is Matthew 5, 38 through 48, the Message translation. Jesus continued, "Here's another old saying that deserves a second look. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Is that going to get us anywhere? Here's what I propose. Don't hit back at all. If someone strikes you, stand there and take it. If someone drags you into court and sues for the shirt off your back, gift wrap your best coat and make a present of it. And if someone takes unfair advantage of you, Use the occasion to practice the servant life. No more tit-for-tat stuff. Live generously. You're familiar with the old written law, love your friend, and its unwritten companion, hate your enemy. I'm challenging that. I'm telling you to love your enemies. Let them bring out the best in you, not the worst. When someone gives you a hard time, respond with the energies of prayer, for then you are working out of your true selves, your God-created selves. This is what God does. God gives God's best, the sun to warm and the rain to nourish, to everyone, regardless, the good and bad, the nice and nasty. If all you do is love the lovable, do you expect a bonus? Anybody can do that. If you simply say hello to those who greet you, do you expect a medal? Any run-of-the-mill sinner does that. In a word, what I'm saying is grow up. You are kingdom subjects. Now live like it. Live out your God-created identity. Live generously and graciously towards others the way God lives toward you. Woo! There's a lot in there. Man, who chose this, right? So good. But this next time through, we're going to listen to the text, and we're going to listen for a word or phrase that touches our heart, that gets our attention. So that's what we're listening for, just one word or one phrase. We're not going to have it on the screen, but it is on the bulletin insert that you have there. So if you'd like to visually see it and kind of track along, pull that out. Otherwise, you can just close your eyes and listen, and that's fine too. And, we're usually drawn to more than one thing, right? But just pick one. There's no wrong answer here. So just listen for what shimmers for you, what you feel curious or confused or stirred or distracted by. When the word or phrase is found, kind of grab hold of that and just gently recite it quietly. Repeat it and reflect on it in the short silence that will follow our reading. And then after that silence, Jason will come up and just ask for those words so you can kind of speak those out loud at that moment. Here's another old saying that deserves a second look. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Is that going to get us anywhere? Here's what I propose. Don't hit back at all. If someone strikes you, stand there and take it. If someone drags you into court and sues for the shirt off your back, gift wrap your best coat and make a present of it. And if someone takes unfair advantage of you, use the occasion to practice the servant life. No more tit-for-tat stuff. Live generously. You're familiar with the old written law. Love your friend and its unwritten companion. Hate your enemy. I'm challenging that. I'm telling you to love your enemies. Let them bring out the best in you, not the worst. When someone gives you a hard time, respond with the energies of prayer. For then you are working out of your true selves, your God-created selves. This is what God does. God gives God's best, the sun to warm and the rain to nourish, to everyone regardless, the good and bad, the nice and nasty. If all you do is love the lovable, do you expect a bonus? Anybody can do that. If you simply say hello to those who greet you, do you expect a medal? Any run-of-the-mill sinner does that. In a word, I'm saying this. Grow up. You're kingdom subjects. Now live like it. Live out your God-created identity. Live generously and graciously towards others, the way God lives towards you. Friends, thank you for taking a moment to reflect, to share. So the next step after reading is reflection. We reflect. We each ponder what this word or phrase means. We ask where it touches our life right now. So we're listening for God. We're letting God kind of connect the dots for us from this text to our life. So embrace the things that come up for you. Listen to them. Continue to repeat the word or phrase while holding it in dialogue with God. We're listening for why this word gets our attention today as we hear the text again. This time we're going to hear it in a different voice. I'm going to have Greg come up to read it. Then we'll have a few moments of silence after.
Here's another old saying that deserves a second look. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Is that going to get us anywhere? Here's what I propose. Don't hit back at all. If someone strikes you, stand there and take it. If someone drags you into court and sues you for the shirt off your back, gift wrap your best coat and make a present of it. And if someone takes unfair advantage of you, use the occasion to practice the servant life. No more tit-for-tat stuff. Live generously. You're familiar with the old written law, love your friend, and its unwritten companion, hate your enemy. I'm challenging that. I'm telling you to love your enemies. Let them bring out the best in you, not the worst. When someone gives you a hard time, respond with the energies of prayer, for then you are working out of your true selves, your God-created selves. This is what God does. God gives God's best, the sun to warm and the rain to nourish, to everyone, regardless, the good and bad, the nice and nasty. If all you do is love the lovable, do you expect a bonus? Anybody can do that. If you simply say hello to those who greet you, do you expect a medal? Any run-of-the-mill sinner does that. In a word, what I'm saying is this. Grow up. You're kingdom subjects. Now live like it. Live out your God-created identity. Live generously and graciously toward others, the way God lives toward you.
So we'll have a chance to share in a moment just what we're hearing after this final reading. The third step in Lectio is to respond. So the third and final reading is for the purpose of hearing an invitation into response, into action. What is God in this text calling us to do or to become today or in the week to come? How might we see ourselves or the world differently? What's our response? That's what we're holding. And of course, answering this question may take longer than the next few minutes. You may need to savor it this week, just live into the meaning and the response that we hear, so please do that. But we begin to listen for that response as we hear this passage a final time. Here's another old saying that deserves a second look. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Is that going to get us anywhere? Here's what I propose. Don't hit back at all. If someone strikes you, stand there and take it. If someone drags you into court and sues for the shirt off your back, gift wrap your best coat and make a present of it. And if someone takes unfair advantage of you, use the occasion to practice the servant life. No more tit-for-tat stuff. Live generously. You're familiar with the old written law, love your friend, and its unwritten companion, hate your enemy. I'm challenging that. I'm telling you to love your enemies. Let them bring out the best in you, not the worst. When someone gives you a hard time, respond with the energies of prayer, for then you are working out of your true selves, your God-created selves. This is what God does. God gives God's best, the sun to warm and the rain to nourish, to everyone, regardless, the good and bad, the nice and nasty. If all you do is love the lovable, do you expect a bonus? Anybody can do that. If you simply say hello to those who greet you, do you expect a medal? Any run-of-the-mill sinner does that. In a word, what I'm saying is this: grow up. You're kingdom subjects. Now live like it. Live out of your God-created identity. Live generously and graciously towards others the way God lives toward you. Now we make some space to share what we're hearing with one or two other folks. So in just a moment, please find one or two at the most, and just take 1 minute each, just to name the word or phrase that's coming up for you and why you think that's coming up, why it's interesting or curious, what's disruptive about it. So aim to take no more than 1 minute each. And do know that you don't need to share it all, so feel free just simply to pass or just to say just as little as you'd like. So there's no pressure in this, but it's an opportunity if you would like to take it. Connecting with someone that you don't know, or at least that you did not arrive here with, is particularly beneficial. We're going to have a countdown on the screen, so just to let you know when you should finish up that sharing time. So let's move decisively, and smoothly into groups of 2 or 3 at the most, and you can stand to move around as you need to, okay? Ready, go. All right, friends, I invite you to finish those final thoughts as we wrap it up. Thank you for taking this time. I know this is courageous work when we share like this, so thank you. I invite you to very intentionally just keep holding what you're hearing for yourself, what you've just heard shared too. I wonder if you noticed what the forming question is in this text, and did it get you like it got me? Jesus says, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Is that going to get us anywhere? Right? Is that going to get us anywhere? I hear this just spoken into all the cycles of speech and violence and things that we're in right now. And it isn't just about seeing it outside of myself, right? Look what everyone else is doing wrong. It's not just about that, but I hear it for me too. Like, how do I keep score? How do I keep those cycles going? And there was that whole sentence in there that really grabbed me, where Jesus says, when someone gives you a hard time, respond with the energies of prayer, for then you are working out of your true selves, your God-created selves. From that psyche space, right? That's uniquely us, responding not from all of the pain that we carry or that's been inflicted on us. And again, we all have it, but how it's said here, we're responding with the energies of prayer from our spaciousness, working out of our true selves, our God-created selves. Yes. And it is something that we keep opening up to, that we're never done with, that we're never done making space for. But I hope you found yourself squirming a bit today, like I did, in the best possible way with this text, because this is the good stuff and the hard stuff, right? So as we finish our time in Lectio Divina together, the fourth and final step of Lectio Divina is simply to remain. Isn't that great? Just to remain, to simply rest as the beloved of God in the presence of God, to hold what we have heard and experienced as gift and grace and hope for us, and to let it all just continue to simmer now and in the week to come. So as we remain and finish this holy time together, let's continue to hold this sacred space for each other as the band comes up and gets ready. But please reconnect with your breath. Close your eyes. I want you to open your palms, your hands on your lap if comfortable for you. And I'll just pray as we remain with God together. God, we breathe deeply now of Jesus' words, for in them we hear this open-handed invitation into a life of deeper love. Here you are extending a hand to us, giving us the permission to grow up and into our God-created selves. Thank you, God, that we get to try this life of love and to embrace how messy and awkward and hard it can be. And to know there is grace upon grace for all the stumbling that we do, even for the ways in which we get hurt and the ways in which we hurt others. So thank you for that grace, for being our God who, no matter how we feel or what we have or haven't done, you give the sun to warm and the rain to nourish unconditionally and boundlessly. For all this, we say thank you. Amen.